there's no way this heinous regime, which is causing us an enormous amount of difficulty all around the region, comes out of this strengthened. The question is, are they permanently weakened, or are they going to be in a position to come back?
I'm host Michael Allen with Beacon Global Strategies. Today I'm joined by Mr. Michael Doran. He's the Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at the Hudson Institute. He also served as a Senior Director for the Middle East in President George W. Bush's National Security Council. Mr. Doran joins us for a discussion today on the rapidly developing conflict in Iran and the broader implications for the region. Stay with us as we speak with Michael Doran. Michael Doran, welcome to NatSec Matters.
Great to be here.
Well, Mike, we're old colleagues. We worked together in the Bush NSC, and it's great to be reunited with you today.
Yeah, you were always a pleasure to work with in the NSC. And I say that I'm not being diplomatic. You were always highly professional, well-informed, unruffable. That's the unflappable.
All right. Well, we're going to keep that in the podcast. That's not going to be edited out.
That's absolutely
that's good.
Absolutely.
Well, you were always kind. You always had a lot of time for everybody, and that's why I'm so glad to have you on the podcast today. You are out there crushing it on X. Your commentary is must read, so I'd encourage our listeners to make sure they're paying attention to what you write and what's all of your commentary. But let's start with this, Mike. It is really difficult to get any reports, much less reliable reports on what is going on inside of Iran. If anybody has contacts and insights, it's you. How are they reacting to the bombing campaign?
They have one goal in mind right now, and that is to survive. And when I say they, we're talking about the IRGC. The state is now run by the IRGC, and that's in a way it's an old story. Back when you and I were working in the White House, that process was well underway under the presidency of Ahmadinejad. The IRGC was taking over. So we used to always say this was the regime of the mullahs, but the IRGC, the Praetorian Guard, the Revolutionary Guard, they were increasingly becoming the dominant element in the regime and moving everybody else aside. So kind of a sort of a military dictatorship. This is not the normal military, though. The IRGC is different than the Artesh, which is the normal military. The normal military was built up by the Shah, and it had a reputation for being pro-monarchy and for being pro-American because it had such close relationship with the United States. So the IRGC has always neglected, the Islamic Republic has always neglected the Artesh. There's no serious ground forces, the Air Force, the Navy, they're all weak, the regular Navy and regular Air Force. And they are under the very close supervision of the IRGC. So this process was already well underway when we were in the White House 20 years ago. But now we've had during...
And this is the strengthening of the IRGC, not just as a regime guardian, but a power center in and of itself.
A power center in and of itself, the dominant element in the country in every respect. They politically, diplomatically, and economically, they run the industries that they control. Amount to somewhere between 30 and 50% of the GDP. They're really deeply entrenched in everything. So they've carried out what I've been calling, perhaps a little bit erroneously, a coup d'etat in the midst of the war. I say erroneously because we've seen this process of them being the major element for some time, but they're not pretending otherwise now when they're under this existential threat from the United States and Israel. Over the weekend, the President Pezeshkian apologized to the neighbors for the attacks against them and promised that it wouldn't happen anymore. And the IRGC commander came out and said, don't publicly. I mean, said, don't listen to Pezeshkian. He doesn't represent anything. so you can't. I mean, that's the kind of split that you can't hide. I mean, that's pretty obvious that.
And people say we're mean to our State Department. Yeah,
yeah. Back when the debate here in Washington was about the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal with Obama, I never bought the line that the Obama administration was pushing and the Europeans were also pushing, namely that we are, through this deal, strengthening the moderates against the hardliners. I never believed that because the moderates I always saw, I used to call them infidel handlers. People like Zarif, the foreign minister at the time, Rouhani, he was the president. They are elements that the IRGC likes to put in front when dealing with the Westerners, because it's a good way to manipulate the Westerners and make the Westerners feel like they're having some kind of influence over the calculus of the Iranian state. But the real calculus of the Iranian state is the calculus of the IRGC. And if there was ever, a debate going on between the presidency and the IRGC and so on, that's now ended. The IRGC is in the driver's seat. They had to do this. They had to present themselves to the world as in the driver's seat because of the elimination of Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader. Another element in Iranian politics is the household of the supreme leader. Because he created a kind of umbrella over the whole regime that was really the dominant element, and he personally defined the left and right boundaries of licit political speech and a policy. But he was very much in line with the hard line of the IRGC.
Right.
Once he was eliminated, and Donald Trump started talking about the possibility of choosing the next supreme leader or having a say in it,
right,
and they could see clearly that Donald Trump had a Maduro option in mind. It was very important for them to show the world that option doesn't exist.
Right.
So that's mainly what's going on, and we can talk a little bit if you want about Mojtaba, the son, and how.
Oh, definitely. I want to get to that. Okay, so that's fascinating. The IRGC, the regime, number one priority is to survive at all costs. Maybe raise the costs on the United States by regionalizing the conflict. Doing what they're doing in the Straits of Hormuz, but. Tell me a little bit more about what the Iranian people might be doing. How are they reacting? Is it conceivable they'll go back out on the streets at the conclusion of the bombing?
Conceivable, but it can't be guaranteed. We've lost in the last round of protests 30,000 people, perhaps more.
Yeah.
They were just mowed down by the IRGC, basically. So it's an existential fight for the IRGC, and the U.S. and Israel have made clear that they regard the protesters as one of the elements in their arsenal. So are these people going to go out and just get mowed down again, or is the regime going to be so weakened that it will start to collapse? I'm more inclined, as an outside analyst, I'm more inclined to focus on those things that you can actually, like a military analyst in a sense, that things that you can actually touch and count, and so on. So I'm much more focused on missile launches and drone launches and the continued ability of the regime to pull those off, it's quite resilient in that regard, than I am to be thinking about the protesters.
Well, I was hoping you would say that there's a chance they would come out, but does ever experts seem to agree that you need a schism within the regime?
Yes.
And so you endorse that idea?
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm looking for. Any sign of a crack in the regime, and the IRGC circled the wagons. That's what I was saying before, and there's no sign that we should not see the disagreement between Pezeshkian and the IRGC as a crack in the regime, because I mean this is the Pezeshkian at this point is window dressing. The place is run by the IRGC, and we see no sign of disagreement there. And as I said, there's no sign that the key element in the IRGC that is going to determine whether they take this to a ceasefire or whether they're forced to surrender is cracking, and that key element is the missile units and the drone units of the IRGC. They're still operating at a high level. Their number of launches is way down, but which is a very good thing. The number of launchers has been severely degraded. The Israelis and the Americans have destroyed a lot of the launchers, but they still have them. They're still using them, and they are using them to a significant effect. Their accuracy is growing, not diminishing. They're gaining data during this, and they seem to be getting targeting data from the Russians, is what we've heard. I strongly suspect they're getting it from the Chinese as well.
Yeah, I think they probably are. So you haven't been able to detect any signs of a schism within the regime, but if there were cleavages, here's a few I've heard. You mentioned the Artesh, the regular army, maybe, and it feels like one of Netanyahu's speeches tried to appeal to regular army versus IRGC. Maybe it's people who are taking advantage of the spoils system within the IRGC and those who haven't or currently aren't. So haves versus have-nots. Or maybe it's a generational split. Are those the cleavages to look for? Or is there more to it than that?
It's very unscientific, all of this, but the people who who really know Iran, they tell us that know it from the inside. They tell us that there's only 15%, 20% of the population that supports the regime, and that's because their livelihood is totally bound up with the regime. But that's a significant number when you realize that they have the guns and the others don't. When they understand that if the regime goes down, they may lose their lives, their families may lose their lives, so their backs are really to the wall. So that's a really it's a minority of a minority. But it's a very motivated and unified minority is the way I would think about it. And also, it's a minority that is concentrated in the cities, in the major cities. I mean, this is where politics takes place, really. And Iranian society has lots of ethnic cleavages, and ultimately, those ethnic cleavages are working to the advantage of the regime.
Oh, really? I thought you were going to say that the Persians are either a plurality or a bare majority, and that Kurds and other rest of ethnic groups might see this as their opportunity to pounce. But it's the opposite, huh?
Well, it's a bit more complex than that. There's an element to that. There are two areas where you could get an insurgency going pretty easily, and that's among the Kurds and among the Baluch. Iran has lots of different ethnic groups. It's a many different ethnic groups, but the main ones to be thinking about are there are five, and that's the Azerbaijanis, the Kurds, the Arabs, or the Ahvazis, but the Arabs, the Baluch, and the Turkmen. But the Kurds, there's been talk about arming the Kurds, and I'm not a big supporter of that idea.
Okay.
Because I don't think it really helps you in the end. One, the Kurdish areas are very far away from Tehran, from the cities. So geographically, you're not, the rebellion you're starting isn't helping you in the cities. Secondly, it alienates the Turks. And we want to keep the Turks on the sidelines in this. The Turks don't like this war, but they're not opposing it in any way. And this entangles us with the Turks in ways that are unnecessary, because the Turks are afraid that there's going to be a vacuum created, and the PKK, which is their Kurdish enemy, will get a stronghold in the Iranian Kurdish areas, and this will become a big problem for them, and there'll be refugee flows. It probably alienates the Azerbaijanis as well, the Azerbaijani government, because West Azerbaijan province in Iran has mixed Azerbaijanis and Kurds, and by fomenting a Kurdish rebellion, you are almost guaranteeing ethnic clashes between Azerbaijanis and Kurds.
I see.
And then finally, there's the Persians, and you mentioned they're a plurality. I don't think they're a majority. I think they're somewhere 40 some odd percent. But the effect it has on Persian opinion if the U.S. starts arming Kurds and makes that that's like, imagine a foreign power armed Guatemalans or Mexicans and started streaming them across the Texas border, and then called on Americans to rise up, and was calling on other Hispanics in America to rise up. What effect is that going to have on Anglo opinion in the United States? Are people like you and me going to say, "Oh, that's fantastic. I want to align with those people"? That's basically what we'd be doing.
So we saw reports, unconfirmed, that the CIA was arming the Kurds. I mean, they're obviously very, very bright. They know what's going on. What do you think they were after? You think they were just trying to stir up some trouble to put pressure on the regime and didn't think it completely through? But that seems unlike them. Tell us what you think was in their head. What's the best case scenario for what we were apparently doing?
I think they want to discombobulate the regime. They want to make the regime fear that it is being attacked from all sides, and they want to make it move resources away from Tehran over to the Kurdish areas. Just stress the system. And I'm sure that there's also a little bit of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Because what we want to do is create cracks in the regime, and that's the goal.
That's the goal. So, if you were there in the National Security Council working Iran policy like you were, what would you do at this point to try and stir up a regime change movement? Would it be arming certain factions within the IRGC, assuming we were even able to find a disaffected group? Is there any ethnic group play that we haven't thought about or discussed?
I think the most interesting one, and I don't know that it's a play, but the ethnic group that we need to be thinking the most about is the Azerbaijanis, for two reasons. Or actually three reasons, I would say. Number one, they are the largest minority. They're somewhere between 25% and 1/3 of the entire population of Iran is Azerbaijani. They are concentrated right next to Azerbaijan and Turkey. Now, the Azerbaijanis call these people Southern Azerbaijanis, but they themselves, the Azerbaijanis of Iran, call themselves Turks. And the Azerbaijani language is mutually intelligible with Turkish. So this is a Turkic people. They're increasingly consuming media from the country of Azerbaijan and from Turkey. And they are the largest minority, as I mentioned. They're also the best integrated into the state, which makes them, whenever I raise this ethnic question of the Azerbaijanis, I get accused falsely of saying that I'm in favor of fomenting a rebellion against the regime. I don't know that that's possible because of this integration issue. I don't know what is possible to do with them. I do know really clearly, though, that the question of the Azerbaijani allegiance to the state is a question that scares the IRGC more than anything else.
Fascinating.
So, to give you an example, after the Azerbaijanis defeated the Armenians in 2020 in the war, President Erdogan of Turkey went to Baku about 6 months afterwards to have a victory celebration with President Aliyev of Azerbaijan. And President Erdogan stood at the podium and he read a poem, which is a lament, and it's an Azerbaijani folk poem, which it talks about the Aras River, which is the river that divides Azerbaijan proper from Iran, from the Azerbaijanis of Iran, and it laments the fact that these two peoples are divided by this river, right?
Yeah.
And so it longs for unity of these two people who've been apart for 200 years. I mean, there's no this caused a huge diplomatic crisis in relations between Turkey and Iran. The Iranians, the foreign minister Zarif launched a formal protest. There was a whole day of speeches in the Iranian parliament, and the United States, if you think with Donald Trump in the first Trump administration, took their oil exports down to about zero.
Right.
And they said, we don't care. We don't care. We live on jihad and air. We don't need an economy. We don't care. They're very good at putting a tough face out to the world, the Iranians, and pretending that they're never ruffled by anything. But then they squealed like little girls, when Erdogan did what? He read a poem, right? Mm. So they signaled their sensitivity on this issue. And it's one that I think that we should be talking a lot to the Azerbaijanis and Turks about. Now, the Turks do not want to play this card. They do not want to play it. The last thing they want to talk to an American about, whether that's an American official or an American like me, is regime change in Iran. They're against it. For them, it looks like another opportunity to get huge refugee flows. As I said, create a vacuum in which the PKK could move into the. But if President Trump were to call President Erdogan and say, listen, we've got to do something about this, and you have the ability to put pressure on that regime like nobody else. Mm-hmm. And he talked to President Aliyev about that. And got some ideas from them and said to them, look, this is going to happen. But in order to have this conversation, President Trump has to say, I'm not looking for a ceasefire right now. I need to get what I need to get. Here are my absolute war aims. I'm going to get these. We can get it the hard way or the easy way. Help me out with this. That would be interesting. That's what I would, on the ethnic question, that's what I'd be saying.
That's fascinating.
Some other things, if I was in the White House, I would be focused on right now.
Oh, good. Well, I want to get to those too. But Mike, tell me this. I mean, the Israelis support regime change, right? And they're acting accordingly.
The Israelis want regime change. There's no doubt about it. But they're working in a military plan together that was adopted together with the Americans, and they can't color outside the lines there. And the plan is to bring the regime to the point of regime collapse, and then we'll see what will happen with the Iranian people. But if we look at this from an American point of view, Donald Trump has issued 4 basic goals, or stated 4 basic goals. No nukes, no nuclear program, severe curtailment on the ballistic missiles, if not elimination of the ballistic missile program. Number 3, end to support for proxies around the region. And number 4, freedom for the Iranian people. But at the same time, he's also clearly indicated that he thinks this war should be shorter rather than longer, and that he doesn't want a power vacuum. So freedom for the Iranian people means revolution. But he is not in favor of revolution. He wants, in his heart of hearts, and I think he's made it pretty clear, he wants a kind of Maduro option. He wants to have some element of the regime that he can work with. He's basically stated this: we're going to take out the 3 top layers, and we're going to work our way down until we get to the pragmatic element that will do a deal with us. So the minute you start negotiating with the pragmatic, with the element that you have designated as the pragmatic element, then on those first 3 items, the nukes, ballistic missiles, and proxies, you're no longer carrying out revolution. Then you're trying to reach a deal. And Donald Trump wants a deal. I was going to say this before when you said, if I was in the White House, what would I be doing to get regime change? And if I was in the White House, nobody in the White House is talking about regime change. They want those first 3 items. They're emotionally, they're drawn. Their hearts go out to the Iranian people, and they don't want to set them up for slaughter. They want to help them. But Donald Trump also said the other day, and I think he was speaking very honestly here. He said, I want to help them, but they have to exist within a framework in which I can help them.
Right.
And he doesn't want to be the guy to go create that framework. So that's where the tension is. And the Israelis and Americans also want to use the power of public opinion in Iran to work against the regime. But that's a very unreliable. It's a very unreliable tool. Public opinion in Iran is overwhelmingly hostile to the regime.
Yeah.
People, you can see the videos are coming out, and you hear, young girls watching the bombing, which is, going on a few thousand yards away from them, and they're giggling. They're giggling because they're excited. They hate these guys. They're probably also terribly afraid of a possible civil war, what could happen, disruption. But This is a heinous regime. It's a parasitical regime on the society, but it has its levers on all of the hard power.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of our discussion with Michael Doran.
Beacon Global Strategies is the premier national security advisory firm. Beacon works side by side with leading companies to help them understand national security policy, geopolitical risk, global technology policy, and federal procurement trends. Beacon's insight gives business leaders the decision advantage. Founded in 2013, Beacon develops and supports the execution of bespoke strategies to mitigate business risk, drive growth, and navigate a complex geopolitical environment. With a bipartisan team and decades of experience, Beacon provides a global perspective to help clients tackle their toughest challenges.
So, the Israelis want regime change. I assume they're going to target the new supreme leader. Do they just keep going until they and the United States find someone they can deal with?
Well, that's their idea. The key thing that they want to do is take out the nuclear sites, the ballistic missile sites. They want to end all the ballistic missile launches. And the Israelis also want to weaken Hezbollah to the extent that they can during this period. But there's, to the extent that there's tension between the Americans and the Israelis, it isn't apparent at this point. It becomes apparent when that moment comes and Donald Trump says, "Okay, I want to shut it down now because I want a negotiation with the regime," and the Israelis don't like what Donald Trump is negotiating about. That's because the Iranians are going to, through the negotiations, if we get to that point, which we probably will, the Iranians are going to try to split the Israelis and the Americans, and they're going to do that by offering the Americans some kind of concessions on the nukes, but not on ballistic missiles. And the ballistic missiles are as important to the Israelis as the nukes are. I don't know if they'll succeed in that. They may not split the Americans and the Israelis on that. But then they'll also try to split them on the issue of proxies.
Yeah.
Because the minute you start giving economic, what are the Iranians going to demand? They're going to say, okay, let's say they agree to zero enrichment, and they agree to let the IAEA take out all of the enriched uranium from Iran. In return for that, they'll want sanctions relief. But the minute you start letting the money go, then they can use the money to build up their proxies again. And that's also an Israeli concern. That's something that the Israelis may feel a little bit more strongly about than the Americans. So the tensions will emerge then.
Okay, tensions later. But if we're totally on the same page, working from the same script, was it untrue that the United States was surprised that the Israelis hit the IRGC refineries over the weekend? And while you're at it, what about the targeting of the police stations?
No, I don't have any direct information on that. I would be surprised if the Americans were all that surprised by the hitting of these were storage depots. I think that the targeting, the CENTCOM and Israel, they're sitting there looking at the same computer screens, and the targeting, the target acquisition is a joint project, I believe.
Okay. So if I could summarize where you are, the Israelis in the United States, especially the Israelis, well, let's see. The Israelis definitely want regime change. The Americans want to weaken the regime to a point, at least, where we can find someone that Donald Trump can work with to ultimately get a deal. But for now, we're prosecuting the same target lists, and there's no real divergence yet between the two.
No, yeah, the divergence is about the dreams of the aftermath, I think.
Dreams of the aftermath. Okay. All right. Tell us about the new supreme leader.
He might be dead, actually. That's one of the funny things this is the Joe Biden strategy. You know, when fighting Donald Trump, you elect the leader with the least capacity, to keep him buried underground. There's a bunch of rumors going around. One rumor is that he's dead. Another rumor is that he's crippled, or his legs were hurt.
That he's unconscious. I've heard that.
He's in a coma. All could be true. All could be false too. But there's a even if these are false, there's a kind of underlying truth to all of it, which is that he would have been, and if they weren't under this existential threat from the Americans and the Israelis, Mojtaba Khamenei would have been would have been a controversial candidate for this, because he doesn't have any of the credibility that his father had. He's as a religious cleric, he is not distinguished. So he hasn't distinguished him as an ayatollah, as a scholar of Islamic law. He has never really run anything. He's working in his father's shadow. He's totally corrupt. They're all corrupt, but he has a little economic empire. He is the nepotism choice, but that would have been, I think, pre-war. That would have made him a little bit controversial, but because of what I was saying, the pressure that the system is under. They wanted to elect, the IRGC wanted somebody that would guarantee all of the current lords of the system that their position is secure. And that means everybody in the supreme leader's household. Remember I said they created this organization on top of the whole system that is really pulling all of the strings of the system, or at least keeping all of the different elements of the system in line. That organization itself is a very serious organization that has huge economic assets.
Right.
And the fear of everyone who works in that organization is that the new supreme leader will move them out. So you want to assure them at this hour of crisis that they're okay. You want the IRGC to know that it is secure, both politically but also all of its economic assets. And the mullahs, the religious establishment, they're not important in terms of ruling the system like they used to be, but they still matter, and you want to reassure all of them as well. So he is the consensus compromise candidate. And that's why they have elected him. And he may not be alive. I mean, at the ceremony where they announced him, they brought out a cardboard cutout like you have in the movie theaters of him, and everybody applauded.
Really?
It was
Oh my God! I didn't see that.
Yeah, it was like a comedy movie where they're saying, "Here's Mujtaba, the cardboard cutout," and everybody cheered for the cardboard cutout. That's a great symbol of his purpose in the regime right now. His purpose is just to be the cardboard cutout, assuring everyone who was in power the day before the war began that their position is secure.
So who is in charge? The Islamic Revolutionary Guard is in charge, but is it Ali Laranjani? Who's the power?
Well, I was saying before the weekend, I was saying that Ali Laranjani is the top guy. And if there's one guy who's more important than anybody else in this system right now, I was saying Ali Laranjani.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that he is very important because the Supreme Leader moved a lot of the executive functions of his office to Laranjani before he was killed. The system is not totally dysfunctional. They recognize that, if only because of age, that Ali Khamenei may disappear sometime soon, and they had to have processes in place to deal with that. So a lot of his executive duties were moved to Laranjani, and in that regard, I think he's very important. But it looks like, to the extent that I can understand it from the outside, it looks like Laranjani did not play a major role in the selection of Mujtaba, which, if true, is very interesting. But look, this is a very opaque regime. Michael, even when I was in the White House and had all of the top secret clearances and saw all of the intel on this regime, I often didn't understand exactly what they were up to. I used to say about Khamenei back then that when it came to any of the big questions about what he was thinking, what he was planning, that there were two answers, and that's I don't know and it depends. And I learned to distrust a lot of the Iran expertise in the country because people would go out on the television cameras and say that they know exactly what Khamenei is thinking, and I thought, no, you don't. So I'm told that the intel has gotten better since then, but it still remains a very opaque regime. And when you're sitting from the outside like this, and events are moving very quickly, I'm a bit reluctant to say that I know exactly what the relationship is between the leaders of the IRGC and Laranjani. But it looks like they're not 100% on the same page right now.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, let's sum up regime change and then talk about scenarios. It sounds like you're at a very low percentage that we'll have a clean regime change here.
I would put it. It's a scenario, and it's a serious one, and we need to. When thinking in our minds about how this might unfold, we should have that scenario. We should be aware of it, but it's not the most likely one.
Okay, so here's a few scenarios. You score these for me, or come up with your own. On the far left, let's call it, we're greeted with flowers. Democracy breaks out soon. Let's say a different variation of that is, it takes a year. Americans are always impatient. It's going to take a little while. There'll be more protests, more things will happen, more regime weakening. The center is some sort of civil war, either based on ethnic conflict or other trouble that we're able to stir up. Getting more towards the hardline side of things, let's imagine that the the regime. The IRGC is in charge. It's somebody that Trump can work with. And then at the very far extreme, it's the new boss, same as the old boss. Same old IRGC, same old Supreme Leader type. Is that a plausible series of scenarios, or what would you add?
Let me run through quickly how I think of the scenarios.
I should have started with that. You go ahead.
The scenario one is Saddam after 1992.
Okay.
So roundly defeated militarily, significantly weakened, but still defiant, and not working, not working in partnership with us in any way. So no Maduro option there, but weakened. The second option is Putin after the fall of the wall, or the Soviet Union as it becomes Russia. So the new Russia is still run by the KGB in one way or another, but the KGB officers take off their they take off their uniforms, and they put on suits, and they take over the oil company and the gas company, and they and their cronies become the new regime, and it possibly opens up in some ways this way or that way, but it is really if you check the DNA, it's still the IRGC, and that new post 1992 Russia is in the case of Iran, the IRGC will take off its IRGC uniforms, and they'll put on the uniform of Persian nationalism, and they'll say, we are the new Persia, and they will pretend to speak in terms of the people. Maybe they'll make some reforms here or there, cosmetic, in order to cut the deal with Trump that allows them to get some lifting of the sanctions. But they're going to try to. They're going to still be. They're not going to be as defiant as the scenario one. They'll be less defiant, but they'll still be problematic, and they'll still be under sanctions of one sort or another. But there'll be a constant negotiation with the West about it. The third scenario is, I think, civil war, and this is Bashar al-Assad after 2011. So you have a rump regime, and probably in the process of going from Shiite radical regime to Persian nationalist regime, and you have ethnic militias around the country, which are supported and opposed in varying degrees by by outside countries. I think those are the basic scenarios. It's possible that the IRGC changing its suit and becoming Persian nationalist could be the beginning of a political transformation that would move toward, they would have some semblance of election that would bring in new blood, new candidates who would actually, who would actually carrying out some kind of meaningful reform. I would put that as very low odds. But with all of these scenarios, we should think about as points along a process. But what I'm avoiding here is the idea that there's some clear option where we get democracy. I mean, this is not realistic because of what I said before about the IRGC owning 50% of the economy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so honestly, I thought you were going to be more bullish, but
let me be careful here because I'm pretty bullish. I mean, from an American interest point of view. And I could even possibly say from the interest of the Iranian people, but I'm a bit reluctant to say that because I don't know. But there's no way this heinous regime, which is causing us an enormous amount of difficulty all around the region, comes out of this strengthened. The question is, The question is, are they permanently weakened, or are they going to be in a position to come back with the help of the Russians and the Chinese?
What are we not thinking about? The Iranians, I think, regionalized the conflict more or less as they said they would do. They struck the other Gulf Arabs. They're, of course, taking shots at us and as Israel. They're even doing the Straits of Hormuz, which we expected. Well, what other cards do they have left to play?
What we're doing, I'll hit a number of issues that we're not thinking about, but it's not that we're not thinking about the issues, but we don't think about it in the right frame. What we always do is we are always impressed by our own military superiority and our military achievements, which are amazing. I mean, our military is fantastic. It's everything that we say about it, and it is conducting an absolutely exemplary campaign. There's no two ways about it. But the problem in the Middle East always is translating military success into lasting political achievement. And this is hard. And it's hard because our adversaries have more control over the political landscape on the ground than we do. They're the guy on the spot with the levers of repression in their hands, and they understand their environment politically better than we understand it. And we tend to get carried away with our military success and just assume that it's going to lead to political success. So I always feel like my job here in these situations is to be the accountant and to come in and say, you've got this great new, I'm the company accountant, and you've got these great new products that are selling well, but you've gone and you're spending a lot of money, and you're actually spending more money than you're bringing in at the moment. I have to say, look, there's gravity, there's reality, and we have to stay focused on that. It's a hard thing for me to get right because the kinds of things that I'm emphasizing are also being emphasized by the president's opponents. And they're using it to say, he doesn't have a plan, this will never work, it was a mistake, there was no reason to do it. And I'm not saying any of those things at all. I think he needed to do it, he had to do it, he's doing it well, and we're going to come out better in the end. But there are all these challenges which are going to be there no matter what. Now, the key issue is the drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles that they have. And these are disruptive military capabilities that can overwhelm the defenses of anyone, including us, and we're seeing that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they are resilient. These guys firing them are resilient. We're almost 2 weeks into this thing now, and they're still getting it off, despite the fact that we have the superior air superiority, and we're hunting them down. We have to say this is very impressive. Then they understood that this is their great capability. Now we say, because we take out targets, that we're going to end their program, and it's not true. We have to think of this. This is the thing that we need to focus on. This is a ballistic missile program. Destroying the factories, blowing up the stockpiles, it doesn't make the program go away. Making the program go away is the work of years, and it's not just military work; it's also diplomatic work, economic work, and otherwise. So, right. I mean, a Shahed drone, an Iranian Shahed drone, has an antenna on it that is made in Ireland. Wow! They have a global procurement network that is extremely difficult to shut down. What we were talking about before, target acquisition. They hit a radar facility, a relay facility in Israel yesterday or the day before, in the midst of this war with great accuracy. Which shows that in the midst of the war, despite decapitating them, all of the disruption, they're still engaging in serious target acquisition and hitting these targets. Doesn't mean that they did any great huge damage to Israel, but this capability remains, and they are using it. They have a strategy. The strategy is to hit us economically, raise the price of oil. Prolong the war, caused Donald Trump difficulties in his domestic politics through the war, caused the allies, the Gulf allies, to cry uncle. And closing the Straits of Hormuz, which they've done. They've closed it, and it's very hard to open this up because you have to open it up commercially, and the companies, no company, no matter what Donald Trump offers in terms of insurance or escorts or whatever, no company is going to put their ships in harm's way at this time.
Yeah, Mike Doran, that was terrific. Invaluable insights. Thank you so much for joining NatSec Matters.
Thank you.
That was Michael Doran. I'm Michael Allen. Please join us next week for another episode of NatSec Matters.
NatSec Matters is produced by Steve Dorsey with assistance from Ashley Berry. NatSec Matters is a production of Beacon Global Strategies.